There's another group in the county in addition to
So, to do this talk, there's been a lot of interest for self-sufficiency, self-preparedness type topics, people interested in that information. So this is our second in a couple series of workshops that we're going to do on this. The first one last year was on water, and we don't have any more of those left, the discs left?
I'll burn some more, but it's no.
Okay. So that we can do that too. So, okay. Go ahead. We'll go ahead and get started. So, so we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about food storage, and one of the things we talked about in the last workshop is if you go into in a situation like an emergency type situation. If you go to any of the sporting goods places, a lot of them have little workshops on preparedness or survival. You know, obviously, sometimes there's an emergency. The first thing kind of sets in is panic. So one of the first things they talk to you about in any of these things is what they call the rule of threes. And this is what we're going to do to help prioritize in the case of an emergency what you've got going on. Okay, so here it is. 3 minutes without oxygen. Right? Okay. So if you're breathing, you're doing okay. Okay. This is just to keep your mind maybe off the situation a little bit and just prioritize things. 3 days without water. The human body can go 3 days without water. Right? Okay. So obviously that was the first talk we did. That was the most important. 3 weeks without food. As we go through the talk, we're also going to talk about an event. So we will be referring to this chart here: a green event, a yellow event, and a red event. Green event lasting 1 to 10 days. Yellow event 10 to 90 and greater than 3 months is what's considered really bad, a red event. So we're going to be referring back and forth to those. When we were going through our talk last year, the tsunami had come into Japan and they were about here, right? So there's an example. Katrina, where was Katrina? Right here, right? If you've seen pictures of New Orleans, some might say they're down here still, but up here, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. So we'll be referring off and on to this chart. Okay. So why food storage? Maybe y'all are here with just a little bit of an interest. Maybe you have a big interest in this, but we're going to talk about some of the reasons to have food storage. So the first one, obviously, is in the case of an emergency. And the Department of Homeland Security, the Red Cross, all the government people are saying they recommend that you have 3 days of food on hand. So we talked about Katrina, right? So Katrina, from the point where they thought that was going to hit land, this was right before it hit land as a Category 4, to the point where the people were sitting in the Superdome and finally received their food and their supplies. How many days was that? Anyone want to guess? 7. 7 days, right? They were in the Superdome from landfall to the Superdome. That was 4 days that they were actually there with the minimum supplies that they'd gotten. So even the 3-day thing, you know, take that with a grain of salt, right? So, so in case of an emergency. So there's also a disruption in food production. Could be a possible reason why you would need to have food storage. Also, maybe just a disruption in the food delivery network. Who here knows what just-in-time means? What that means for stocking? Okay. So it used to be, back in the 50s and the 60s, right, the mom-and-pop grocery stores had their grocery store, and then they had pretty much the same kind of square footage sitting in the back end that had all of their supplies that they could restock their shelves with. Well, how is this now? Now, this is not a government, this is not a political discussion, but we're just going to talk about it. Now the stores are taxed on the inventory of the things that they've got out there, right? So now they want to maximize the front end, the retail space. They want to minimize what's in the back because that's not getting them anything. So what they're doing now is what it's called just-in-time. And any store, no matter how big that store is, typically only has around 2 days worth of supplies that's sitting in the back. So if the trucks aren't rolling in and the people aren't stocking up an evening, then the shelves go bare, okay? So this is something, if for some reason there's a strike for the truck drivers that are bringing the supplies in, or the railroad people, if there's a war or some sort of social disturbance or something like that, a natural disaster, an earthquake, just even bad weather, means that anybody sitting in this room besides what you have at your house, only has maybe at most 6 meals available to them at the stores and stuff, okay? So, a little bit of a concern there for us, and that's why why we're recommending to have some extra food on hand for you. So that's the just in time. So the next is, unfortunately, a lot of, in our society right now, we've got a lot of people who are unemployed. And, those people, having food supplies on hand while you're looking for your next job, there's an opportunity, here's one less thing you got to worry about in the case of that. Also, I have several friends right now who are darn near retirement age, who now have grandchildren or children living again with them, and with their fixed income, they're trying to stretch their food supplies. Having food storage already on hand in that situation is able for them to stretch their dollar until they can get out of whatever the problem is that's going on there. So that's another example. So when we talk about Katrina, right? Food storage gives you options. So the people that were in Katrina, a lot of their homes and stuff were underwater, so that's not necessarily a great example of this. But this gives you independence from having to rely upon government agencies or aid agencies in the case of in case of a problem. So that's good. If no other reason than the fact that, think about it, if your neighborhood and 50% of the people were doing food storage, and the supplies came in, depending on how large the incident or the disaster or the emergency was, that's that much more supplies that could go down the road to the next addition or neighborhood or community, right? So there's some other reasons to be considering this. So probably the last thing is the hedge against inflation, food inflation costs. So my sons, which you'll see running around here in a little bit, will be back. My littlest one eats all kinds of peanut butter. He loves peanut butter, right? So back in October, 2 little cans of Jiffy peanut butter, right, vacuum sealed at Costco, was running about $8.29 for two jars. A lot better price than you buy on the shelf single jars at other places. But $8.29. That's now $10.98 as of last week. So in a period of 3 or 4 months now, the price has really skyrocketed, right? Having some of this stuff on hand helps you to get past that. And this, once again, bad weather in Georgia has cut back on the peanut production, which is now making everything cost more for us. That's just, yeah, go ahead. Any questions you guys got or anything?
Well, you mentioned about the people down in Katrina, and if they had food storage, how that wouldn't have helped them. But also, depending upon how their food storage was packaged, it could have also been salvageable too. So
Yeah.
even though their house may have been underwater, they might have been able to go down and,
Sure.
and retrieve some of their stuff.
Right.
On how
And we'll talk about sealing methods and stuff and different ways to store. Yeah, go ahead.
I was raised in New Orleans, and in 1965, we had Hurricane Betsy, which was almost as bad, major flooding like Katrina, and a lot of people had food storage, but those are the people that packed their stuff up and left.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you saw on TV were people that didn't have any means of transportation, and they were on welfare, and they didn't have the means to buy extra food. But most of the people in New Orleans do store food. But when a hurricane's coming, they pack up and book.
Yeah.
But it is always a good philosophy to have extra food if you go down there and get. It's just we saw only one element. So.
Well, it's a generational thing too. In 1965, there's probably a lot more people canning and cooking food than so. But anyway, so that fuel costs drive the cost of the food going up, right? The food going in the productions, whether it's the tractors out there bringing in the crops, the trucks that are then taking it from the farm to the distribution centers or wherever it's being processed from there off to you. So all of that, the rising fuel cost equate to rising food cost. Okay, so you never know. In a situation might arise when being self-sufficient and having food storage is either going to help you either just physically by giving you the ability to have food, or financially in the case of like losing your job or some other things. So for this reason, we're asking everybody to consider food storage. So we're going to talk about 3 different types of food storage, and we're going to come into to each of those. But I want you guys to keep in mind at any one time that what we're also talking about is variety. So we're looking for people to not stock 300 pounds of something on the shelf. There is a situation called appetite fatigue. This is more prevalent in the elderly and in the very young, where it will come to a point, if they're receiving the same meal over and over again without a bunch of variety in there, they will become bored with it, and even though they're starving, they will stop eating. Okay? You don't want to be in that situation. So don't go out and buy yourself a pallet of wheat and think you're covered. We're going to talk about a lot of variety and a lot of different options for you today. So the first type we're going to talk about is your pantry items. So when you talk to people about food storage, one of the first biggest concerns that they have is, I don't have any more income. I've got, I'm getting what I've got, and that's all I can do. Well, it doesn't really have to be expensive. The first one are pantry items, and this basically is taking those items that you're already buying when you go to the grocery store and adding a few more of those to your shelf. So if you go there and you're buying 2 cans of soup a week for your meal, and you go there and they're on sale that week, get 4 of them, right? Set those other side. Next thing you know, you're going to be sitting there with 2 weeks worth of food instead of just 1 week or whatever you had on your shelf before. So you start expanding out with that using just your everyday stuff that you're buying anyway at the store. You're already standing there. You don't have to jump online. You're not looking stuff up. You know what your family likes. You know what they're eating. What I would recommend when you're looking at the pantry items is that you look for stuff that's quick and easy to fix. In a situation where, an emergency situation or something like that, where you're under stress and everything seems to be falling apart around you, you don't want to be trying to cook the 12-course meal, right? You want something fast to get the food and the energy back into your family and stuff. So look for the more easy to fix, not real intensive as far as preparation, not really intensive as far as needing a whole bunch of extra stuff added to that. Okay? So consider those. There's a book around here, over there, by a lady named Vicki Tate. She is big in the Mormon community. She's done a lot of interviews with Mormon families that have had a situation, whether that's a job loss or an emergency or whatever, that have had to rely upon their food storage that the Mormon faith has them store. And she's done interviews with them. One of the things that they talk about, and we'll bring this up to the group here, is psychological foods. And these are kind of treats or goodies kind of things. Pudding, little pudding cups, that don't have to be refrigerated. The little Jell-O cups that they've got out there. Hard candies, this kind of stuff. Having those on the shelf, almost to every interview that she went through with people that had lived on their food storage, said that, this was something that really helped them get by. Having that little extra treat every once in a while, especially the families that had young kids, right? So something to consider in your normal everyday stuff. Those things, those psychological type foods are always something to have on hand for your family. So, how are we going to do this? So the pantry items, what I recommend is kind of like the store, right? They get the new stuff, they put it in the back, all the old stuff comes to the front, right? Same way for you guys in your storage. I recommend that you take and you put a marker or something on the front of it with the date, best by date or whatever. Put that on the front so that any one time you can look and say, oh, this is getting close, I need to be using this up or whatever. Just help kind of organize what you've got going on. And just rotate through it so that at any one time an emergency comes, you then have a fresh supply of food sitting on your shelf instead of a whole bunch of expired stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Can you honestly say that use by dates on canned goods?
Absolutely not. I don't believe in those.
Okay.
Open smell.
I tell you what, I honestly feel like, it's going to sound a little paranoid, right? I honestly feel like, they're looking for you to clear off your shelves and to get rid of a bunch of stuff and go buy a whole new set of green beans, right? That's what they're looking for. So, I'm pretty, I consider that more of a guideline, I guess. I guess that's not the official Tea Party stance here, but this, I don't want anybody to get any problems because they ate something expired that was bad. But, you know, I look at it, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
The one thing that I found, I started my food storage a couple of years ago, and I was buying honey by the 6-pound thing, container. My honey now is already starting to crystallize, so that's one thing that you got to keep. Honey.
But you know, if you heat that up,
Yeah.
you heat that up, you'll be
Heat it
back
up.
in business again.
Honey's the only food that never
That's
goes
one of
bad.
the, that's one of the
It will
best.
never go back.
Never
It
go
just
back.
crystallizes.
Right.
But when you
But
heat
you
it up,
have to be careful
assimilates.
with infants,
so it's like
because
brandy.
there's a possibility that botulism from honey could have something to do with SIDS. Now, that's only
Yeah,
a
I
small possibility, because
Yeah.
I know children that died of SIDS that never had honey, but that is something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's our first type of food that we're going to talk about. Next type we're going to talk about, and for lack of another word, we're going to call this prepared foods. And these are the foods that you're going to open the package and eat, or you're going to rehydrate and eat. But basically, it's a your fast, quick meal that comes in a preformed kind of package and stuff. So we're going to talk about those. So one of the first ones I'm going to talk about are called MREs, and that's meals ready to eat. And those are available online. And this is the staple that we've been, or the ration that we've been feeding our soldiers for many years now. And they are rated at, officially, 5 years shelf life, right? But, you know, there's people eating these 10, 12 years later, depending on what it is. They've said that it's been fine. So these are out there. Prepackaged meal. Let's see. They also, inside here, we've got a main entree, usually a side dish, a couple drinks, and usually a snack. The drinks are like like a fruit drink or whatever, and a coffee. So these are kind of a little bit different than some of the others. So what I'm going to do is I talk about these. I'm going to talk about some kind of pros and cons about them, and it's kind of generalized. But so basically, once this pouch is open, there's individual pouches in it. You can open those up. You eat straight out of the pouch. Okay, so you don't need a plate or anything like that. The beef patty or the chicken breast or whatever that's in it. This one's chicken a la king. You can eat straight out of it. It's got a sauce and stuff in it. The moisture's already in it. You don't have to add any water or anything to this. Okay.
Where do you find it?
You can buy them online. I've got a catalog.
Yeah, the catalog that's back
The
there.
catalog that's back there. Yeah, there's a catalog back there. So that's an option. So what I recommend on these, and we'll kind of go through, we'll do pros and cons on this, but what I recommend is that you get some of these and you try them, because you'll find that there'll be some you are okay, and there will be a lot that you don't like. So before you go out and buy a case of chicken a la king, I suggest you buy one and try it first and see. Okay? Yeah.
Is there an expiration date on any of those packs? Because I know
Nope.
that the packs I have at home.
No. Some of them have, and I can't remember the name. Maybe Mark, do you know? Maybe it's called a TTP or something like that. There's a little dot thing that they put in them that you can read, and it changes color. And it says that if it's all dark instead of just the bullseye looking thing, then don't eat it, the kind of thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look online under MRE's shelf life,
Yeah.
there's a couple of good websites on there that'll come right up at the front page of Google, and it'll be on there, and you can see, it'll show the shelf life versus temperatures, how long this lasts under a certain temperature range, and then also it'll show that little bullseye thing for you too.
Are those competitively priced?
As far as,
Well, just.
well, okay, we'll go into that. This is about $8 to $11, this is about $8 to $11, depending on what the main entree is that's in here. So, okay, so directly eaten from the pouch is one of the pros. Requires no water. In case of a situation like our first topic, we talked about water, maybe water's tight. Yeah, go ahead.
They really do need water, not
No, I prefer to drink it with water, yeah.
But you have to use it, pour it in the bag, then there's a little doohickey that you put in there, and it heats the water up, so you can heat the.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that, yeah. So, requires no water necessarily, we'll go into that though. No mixing or blending, you're just spooning straight out of the pouch, right? Doesn't that sound attractive? Very high in calories. Each MRE meal is around 1,250 calories per bag here, okay? In a situation where you're really cold, you're really hungry or whatever like that, and your body's having to work harder to maintain your core body temperature, having a lot of calories on hand is a good thing. They have chemical heaters for these too, and that requires water that you pull it in. There's a little sleeve type packet that slides over this and heats those up for you. So that gives you, just with a little bit of water, that gives you the ability to heat those up and have those warm too. So let's talk about the downside. Very high in salt. They are very susceptible to heat. If you store these in a place that has a lot of heat, the shelf life is greatly diminished. Many consider, especially if you talk to the military guys that have been forced to eat and only eat these for a long period of time, consider their taste very poor. And again, I recommend you go out and find some of these, you try and you find what you like, and then you go from there. A lot of artificial additives are added to each of them. They're a little bit expensive versus the actual food that's sitting in here. Okay, like I said, $8 to $10. Yeah, probably $11.
And the chiclets or the gum in there is also a very important key as well.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
The laxative.
The laxative to help everything go down.
That's
Okay,
awesome.
all right.
Don't eat the gum,
Yeah.
chew the gum.
So if you can imagine, as far as like the number 10 cans, the buckets, some of the things we're going to talk about the rest of the afternoon here, this package is very susceptible to being punctured, okay? And if that happens, then you've lost the integrity of everything that's going on here, and you're quickly going to be, the liquid that's in there is going to be running out. So that's something you got to consider with that. Also, because there is moisture in that was one of the pros. It's also one of the cons, in that this is a little bit heavier than what you're going to find with some of the freeze-dried or dehydrated type items. Okay. So let's go on to the next type of prepared food, and that is your dehydrated foods. A lot of them say, what do you say? What do you guys say on your stuff?
It's
20 to 25 years? What do you say?
Between
25?
20 and 30 years.
Between 20 and 30? Okay. So between 20 and 30 years. As far as price varies by the product that is being dehydrated. So when you have a dehydrated type item, okay, what they're doing is they're taking the food product, they're applying heat to it, okay? That is basically driving out the moisture out of it and makes it for a lower moisture, which is then going to help preserve it for a little bit longer, okay? So that's the process by which this is done. So lightweight, fairly low moisture, easy to store, long shelf life, and fairly low cost. Cons. This requires water. We talked about that in the last workshop. Okay, thank you. For the need for water. You know, if you're storing your 1 gallon per person per day or whatever like that, but you have a lot of dehydrated or freeze-dried food that you've got to reconstitute, then you need to be considering that and how much water that you're storing. So keep that in mind. Another downside is, compared to like some of the freeze-dried stuff, this takes a little bit longer to reconstitute. It's still not that bad of time. Dehydration can, in the case of some items, affect the taste, texture, and color of some of the products that are in there. So depending on what it is, you may see a difference in that. So the other type is freeze-dried foods, and we're going to talk about them next. So in World War II, there was a need for delivering blood plasma to the battlefields in Europe. So the U.S. developed this freeze-drying technique where they were taking blood plasma and they were packaging it so that it could be on unrefrigerated ships going over to unrefrigerated battlefields. So what they do is, in the case of food for this, they're taking the food and they are rapidly freezing this. So that takes all the moisture that's in the food and turns it into a solid ice crystals within the food. They take the pressure on the outside of the food and they reduce it, which then takes the solid crystals into a gas which then comes out of the food. Okay, does that make sense? So that's how freeze-drying, that's how the freeze-dry process works. So consequently, when you look at the pros and cons of this, often the freeze-dried has some of the best taste. A lot of people say that, compared to dehydrated, they consider it better as far as, it being most like the original after you're rehydrated. Often retaining its original texture, color, and shape. Very lightweight because it's very low moisture, even less than the dehydrated type, and retains darn near 100% of its nutritional value. So a lot of good things going with that. Again, cons, just like the dehydrated, you've got you need water to prepare. A little bit higher cost than the dehydrated because of the process that's involved in that. A little bit more bulkier than the dehydrated because we'll show you some of the stuff. It's a little bit more kind of fluffed up than the dehydrated. It was kind of more collapsed upon itself, but that's really, in a number 10 can or something that really is inconsequential. But it reconstitutes really very quickly. In addition to standard items, they also have meals and stuff available, chili mac, spaghetti, meatballs, even ice cream and stuff. So there's a lot of options for there. The last type of the prepared type foods, last thing we're going to talk about is home canning. So this is kind of a two-edged sword in that once you get going and you got all your stuff you need to start, it's fairly inexpensive to be canning your own stuff. It's that money, that onset of getting your canners and all your stuff purchased that is kind of the thing you've got to overcome. So pros and cons to this. Pros, you can store what your family likes. You got a bean recipe that your family loves, in a bad situation like that, there's nothing like having that taste of what you're used to. You're not regulated to an MRE's version of something. You've got your own version of it. So that's always a huge plus. After the initial purchase, it's fairly inexpensive to be canning, and your jars are reusable. Kind of the downside again, you've got that financial investment up front of the types of canners. Water bath isn't too bad. The pressure type canners are a lot more. And obviously for people that are doing food storage, glass jars are more susceptible to breakage than your number 10 cans or your buckets and stuff that we're going to talk about. Okay? So there's kind of some downside. Any questions about that? Yeah.
How long would you say the freeze-dried food would be?
The freeze-dried food, they're saying 25 plus years, right?
25 to 30 years.
They're saying 25, 30 years. Yeah.
That's the longest generally of the ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the dehydration stuff, they also quote as going out to that upper end. But normally, that's, usually the freeze-dried's a little bit longer, I would say.
Once you open the can, that's an unopened can.
That's unopened.
Can.
Okay, let me specify that. We're going to talk about this here later on about how the environmental conditions under which you store stuff. This is under optimum conditions, right? Wheat lasts an incredibly long time, but I've read things on the internet from people who've had wheat only 5 years, and it was making horrible bread. But she was storing her wheat in a place that was getting up to 90 degrees in the summertime, right? Whereas, there's people 30 plus years, right? Plus everyone talking about the Egyptians and the wheat that was sprouting after thousands of years. But anyway, so the environmental conditions that you're putting out, we'll go through those, greatly affect you hitting that 30 or that 25-year mark. So, okay? So that's our kind of prepared foods. Yes?
What about the nutrients in freeze-dry and?
It's 100%. Is that what they're saying?
Nutrients?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very good. So, okay, let's talk about the last category. This is the one everybody kind of jumps to. You start talking about home storage and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get myself a pallet of wheat and I'm going to, okay? Bulk foods, okay? These are your rice, your beans, your pastas, your flours, your salts, your sugars, your wheat, right? So pros and cons of this. So buying in bulks allows you to purchase the food cheaper. That bag right there, the small 25-pound bag, the one next to it, both 25-pounders, that's $9.34 for that bag, right? There's quite a few meals in there. Keep in mind, we're trying to keep the variety and stuff going here, but fairly inexpensive. Buying it cheaper allows your food, whatever extra money you have to devote to your food storage to go farther, right? So that's important. Buying also allows you to maybe go in with a friend that's sitting next to you here And maybe the two of you split the cost of that. With bulk foods, one of the most expensive parts of that is the shipping, right? Because it's very heavy. And consequently, you know, a lot of times if you buy up to a certain part, the manufacturer will then just eat the shipping. So that's kind of good. I know Mark's got some stuff laying back there with some typical prices on it for the bulk stuff. That from Costco and Sam's Club, both, or just Costco? Just Costco. So there's some examples back there. You can see how much, what that kind of stuff goes for. So let's talk about the pros and cons of that. So that was the pros, I guess. I went through that. The cons. So a lot heavier than your some of your prepackaged meals, right? I mean, you've got your pounds per meal or whatever. You're doing real good over there, but you've got to keep in mind that where you're storing this and keeping this, there's a lot of places that you can stuff or squirrel some of these away in your house, little cubbies or little places, little shelves, that you can't set a 47-pound bucket worth of grain in, right? Okay? So you've got this volume and you've got this weight you've got to deal with, especially when you get multiples of those sitting on the shelf, right? So you've got to kind of keep that in mind. That's a little bit of the downside. If you physically have a problem with lifting something that's 47 pounds, you know, you need to go to a smaller bucket. That's 47 pounds in a 6-gallon pail, right? You need to go down to a 5-gallon pail, or you need to go down to even smaller, or look at Mylars or something like that. But we'll talk about those. So if you have lifting restraints for you, you need to be considering that in your food purchasing. Obviously, I consider the bulk type foods. These are like your basic building blocks. This is, you know, these are items that you are going to have to work to make a meal out of. Okay, you got to keep that in mind. It's not something that you're going to be firing up in an emergency situation where you got to kind of get food in everybody real quick. You know, there's some preparation time that goes into this. Any of those things that you've got, these basic type items, typically require something in addition to that to make them edible, okay? Spices, baking type items, flavorings, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about those, and that's something that you're going to have to consider if you're doing a lot of this stuff with the bulk foods that you need to be storing also. So your fats, so your cooking oils, your butter, your shortening. So what's the advantages of using those things? The fats. Taste increases the taste, right? Cooks faster, right? Satisfies the hunger. Adds more calories into what you're eating, right? So some big advantages. Sweeteners, sugar, honey. You're diabetic, sugar substitutes you need to be considering. Flavorings, broths, bouillons, that kind of thing. Spices, salt, pepper, garlic. Your Italian seasoning, your poultry seasoning. Baking items, yeast, baking powder, baking soda, vanilla. All those kind of things you need to supplement with that. You will go very hungry with a pallet full of wheat sitting there, and that's all you got. Okay? People won't last very long. So I want to caution about wheat to everybody. You know, that's one of the first things people talk about. It's fairly inexpensive, right? Except everything, but I want everybody to consider this, right? If you go on the internet and you start talking about looking up food allergies, right? Basically, a lot of the websites say that 90% of all food allergies are one of these 8 items. Wheat is one of those 8 items. Okay? It's like milk, shellfish,
peanuts.
They call it ground nuts, tree nuts, and your walnuts and that kind of stuff that grows out of the tree. Did I say milk already? Wheat. Anyway, there's 8 or so of them. One of them is wheat. What we found for people is,
One thing you have to consider though too is that like some people will show allergies, and you find out that it has to do with the way the food was processed. For example, a lot of people when they drink milk and dairy products will demonstrate a lot more symptoms of their allergies, but it's because of the synthetic vitamin D that they put in after they have processed, after they treated the milk, pasteurized the milk into the natural vitamin.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, you know, people will tolerate that, okay? But like Vicki Tate, when she was with these people, she was finding that there was a lot of people that were actually allergic to it. And when that became a main staple for them, those allergies came right to the surface very quick. When you're dealing with, in addition to everything, you're dealing with wheat allergies also, okay? So for that reason, I typically recommend, I don't have a problem with people having wheat, I just usually recommend that you look at some of these other things instead. So I usually recommend that you consider your grains, your beans, your legumes and stuff. So we're looking at rice, oats, corn, spelt. Spelt is very good. Spelt is a grain that can be ground like wheat, can be used like stuff with. People who are allergic to spelt, so that's a good option for you. Wheat. Dried pastas and peas. Okay? Keep in mind, when you look at any of these, what's inexpensive now, expensive, so we want to keep that in. So we've talked about some of the stuff we want to store. So the next question is, how much are we going to store? And back in the day, how this was usually done, you could do, first was the volume way, and you'd say, okay, you'd start a diary for a week, and you'd say, everything you put in your mouth, you write down a list. And you're writing down this list, you get at the end, you grab the whole family's list, you put them all together, and you say, okay, this is how much I need. If you're up here in a green event or something, you're saying that what I need to prepare for my family is this, right? That's not that bad. When you start going out lower on the chart here, that becomes really more cumbersome to be trying to do, okay? So the volume method, that's a good example if you're up here, but you know, let's look at some of the other ones and you guys can figure out what you like better. The next one's the calorie method, where people talk about, I need X amount of calories per person per day, okay? Then they start looking at the food that they've got available for them to store. They figure out what the calorie count of that is, and they back their food supplies back into that number, whatever that is, right? Real cumbersome. Again, okay for 5 or 10 days or whatever you're trying to do. You start going out farther, it becomes a mathematical nightmare trying to do all this stuff. So that was another option for us. Thankfully now, they have what they call these calorie calculators that are out on the internet. And we're gonna talk about a couple of those. I can pass this around. Here's an example of one of these. So the foodstoragemade-easy.com is one of the websites, and that's on my handout that I've got for everybody before they leave today. But that's one of them. It's nice. You basically say, I've got X amount of adults, X amount of children, and I want to store for X amount of weeks. It comes through and it throws down all your bulk items. You can see them on there. Downside to this is, it does not really take into consideration any of your prepared foods. So if you're doing kind of a mix and match thing, if you're doing some MREs, you're doing a bunch of dehydrated or freeze-dried foods, it doesn't really have the ability to input that into the chart. The bulk foods, that sheet is nice, and it's an Excel type format, in that you can adjust that. My family cannot tolerate wheat, let's say. You can take the wheat off there, put beans in there in its place, and rerun it. Off to the side, you can say, I already have this, and this, and this that's on the list already. It says now it already does the calculation for you. This is how much more you need. It has a place in there where you can say, I can buy wheat at so many and beans for so many dollars per pound. You can place those numbers in there. It'll calculate out and says, you are two. And it's all in there. Here's your shopping list. It shows off to the side. You're deficient here, 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 and here. That's pretty nice. A better one is the one I found on Emergency Essentials. And maybe you all have some other examples of this, but the Emergency Essentials one, which is beprepared.com, has that. But it allows you to add your freeze-dried foods, your dehydrated foods, your MREs, your pantry items that we talked about, your grocery store items on there, in addition to your bulk foods. So that one's in beprepared.com. So that's a little bit better one. I don't have a printout of that. That doesn't print out real well, but you go on the site and you can look at that, and that's a really nice one to use. Okay? So, one of the things I want everybody to consider when you're looking at some of these food calculators, or doing the calorie count or the volume count, odds are if you're in a situation where you're under stress or there's a lot of things going on and stuff, you're going to find typically you're going to need more calories than you do now. Okay? Does that come? Mm-hmm. Let me give you some examples of this. Okay? Why do I burn in which situation do I burn more calories? I come home from work, I sit down in front of the television, I watch the television, I'm sitting in a 70-degree house, right? I burn X. Same day, same cold February evening, right? I'm sitting in my house in front of my television, but now my house is 50 degrees. Why? Because the situation that I'm in, I have no power or no gas or whatever that is that I'm heating my home with, right? A lot different. I'm burning a lot more calories to keep my core body temperature up, right? So that is, that's a situation where I'm going to need more calories. Figure that into your calculator, right? I'm going to, instead of saying I got 2 adults and 2 kids, I'm going to say 4 adults, or I'm going to say 3 adults and 1 kid. I'm going to cheat the calculator to add in more calories because I think I'm going to need them in that situation. Okay? Here's another example of that. Let's look at the calories over a day. So instead of going to work and sitting in my cubicle on my computer banging around on that all day, coming home and sitting in front of my couch at a 70-degree house, now I'm staying at home all day, splitting and stacking wood, so that I can bring it and burn it at night, so that now I can try to maintain somewhere around 60 or 70 degrees in my home. Okay? A lot more calories, right? So something to consider when you're using some of these food calculators and stuff. So the next we're going to talk about where to store and how to store. So the first complaint I hear when I talk to people about food storage is the cost, right? And we talked about some ways to try to inexpensively get that in. The next one that I typically hear is, I just don't have any room in my house. I mean to put all this stuff in my house, and I just don't have any. I just don't have the square footage to be doing this kind of thing. So somebody's saying, they got a 600 square foot house or a 1,300 square foot house. What they're talking about is the square footage of the floors inside your four main walls, right? So what we want to try to do is either find solutions that utilize less of the floor square footage, or we're looking for something that's using square footage that's not being taken up by anything else. So one of that obviously is shelving unit. For a 3-foot wide shelf by 1 foot only takes up 3 square feet of your house, but the shelves going up the wall allows you to handle more. Okay? You need to make sure your shelves are beefy enough to handle the weights. We've got some of these we're going to be showing around and stuff. You can see there is not a lot of weight in this. This is really lightweight. Okay? Bulk items, not so much. So we'll talk about that. But be creative when you're looking at your space, right? Instead of taking shelves up your normal 6 foot or whatever that a normal shelving unit is, consider taking shelves all the way to the ceiling, right? You may need a ladder, you may need a step stool or whatever to get it, but utilize all that space all the way up. Lighter stuff on the top, right? Heavier stuff on the bottom, okay? Well, Marty, that's really ugly. I'm not sure about that, okay? Go down to Walmart or wherever you shop and buy yourself some inexpensive sheets and make yourself kind of a curtain or partition. Just partition that off so you don't have to stare at it. Whatever it takes, right? So be creative. Utilizing the space under your bed. A lot of people take the kind of roll-away kind of totes that fit under there. Some of them may or may not handle a number 10 can. Bring your can in with you or measure it if you need to do that. Also, your beds and stuff. A lot of your home stores and that kind of stuff sell these little pylon things. And it sits on the floor, it's got a base and it kind of tapers up to a top. Your bed frame sits on that, and it gives you another, for lack of another word, ground clearance on your bed of around 6 or 8 inches or so. So that way you can get more stuff under there, okay? So there's another example is sometimes you've got the single shelf, right, with a curtain rod, your coats and stuff hanging off of there. But a lot of times there's more space between there and the ceiling, right? Well, something that lasts 25 years, you're not necessarily going to be touching this thing every day, right? So utilize that space that's above there. Place a second shelf up there and place your cans and stuff up there. Kind of out of sight, it's up there, but available to you and your family in case of an emergency. Some of the guys take their 5-gallon buckets like that, take 2 or 3 or 4 of them around, maybe get another 5-gallon and put on top. They cut out a piece of plywood, they lay it on the top, and they put a drape or something over it, and it becomes their end table in their living room. You can be real creative in how you store and stuff, right? Everyone's like, yeah, not in my house, right? But anyway, so you can get creative on the space that you have an end table anyway, right? So anyway, so that's another. So we're going to talk, yeah.
I store mine under the stairs.
Oh, yeah, under the stairs is a great space, but, you know, it's not normally where you store stuff, so that's always a good place. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about storage conditions. So we talked about this shelf life and that shelf life and what we've got going. All this is based off of optimum condition. So the most abundant food supply that you got going isn't going to do you any good if you go to use it and it's not ready for you, okay? So we want to make sure that we're optimizing our conditions. So some of the things that reduce the shelf life of items are exposure to oxygen, light, heat, and moisture, okay? So we're looking for, you know, typically a darker space like we're talking about under the stairs or something, a darker space like that doesn't get too hot, no light on there, storing it in. The lady I talked about with the wheat that was stored in 90-degree condition, no, a lot of food went into that situation there. So yeah, obviously not something we want to do. The other thing is we want to come up with storage containers and things that are resistant to insects and rodents and stuff too. Nothing can more quickly decimate your food supply than to get a whole bunch of animals and things living in there, right? So we want to make sure that we're choosing containers that are resistant to that. So that may mean some of these things, right? We're going to maybe store this in like one of the totes and stuff I've got under the tables I brought stuff in. Maybe I'm going to store in that with the lid on top of it to try to protect it. Some of the Mylars and stuff too, you know, rats and stuff can chew their way into that if they wanted to. We're going to make sure that we protect stuff that way. All right, so I'm right at an hour here. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break, let everyone go to the bathroom or answer their important emails or whatever they got. And we're going to go around, we're going to talk about the different stations and walk around and we're going to try to get some samples of some of the different types of foods out for you guys to try. And we're just going to kind of walk through that. So any questions or anything you got, you can come up here and look at the MREs and this stuff.
Marty, everybody, basically one week go home or whatever.
Yeah, I was just going to make sure, if you come up here, be sure to look at this one. This is a French MRE. Look at what's in here. Interesting.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Marty Fulkerson. I experienced this kind of stuff and said, does anyone want to come out and stand in front of a bunch of people they don't want to talk? And I volunteered.
You have the experience.
Yes. I've been doing food storage for more years than I'd rather say. So.
Does a disaster come to your house?
No, yes. Let me give you my address.
Real quick, Marty, I want to touch on a couple of things real quick. You folks are here because you understand the importance of what we're doing. You know, there's a word, it, when it happens. Terrorist attack, nuclear weapons, EMP, natural disasters, whatever it is, you guys know where we need to be on this. Now, one thing, I'm a little bit more radical than Marty, and I wanted to just kind of throw some things out to you. You want to be able to, if you can afford it, have what I call barter food. Okay? This is that is on my list. Ammunition, firearms. All of you
I'll say
that,
something when we get there.
when you start building up your food storage and people start that, okay, that guy over there, I know he's got food. You want to be able to defend yourself. It's going to be a food storage and how to take care of things. What I do is you can go to Costco and you buy these cases of Top Ramen, 48 pouches in there. I call that my barter food. Folks, if you've got food and your neighbor doesn't have food, the hardest thing that you're going to come across, the hardest decision you're going to have to make is when your neighbor comes to your door and he's got 3 little children over his house and he needs something to food. You've got to make a moral decision. Are you going to keep your food? That's your personal decision. If you choose not to share your food, that man just might have a weapon. So part of food storage is guns and ammunition. I'm radical. Okay. Straight up radical. Okay. The other, kind of some of the other things you want to talk, that we want to touch about is vitamins, aspirins, ambisol. Dental work in a crisis or a month or two is going to be very difficult to deal with. If any of you all had a toothache, it decapitates you. I mean, you can't even do anything.
From Emergency Essentials, you can also purchase a temporary filling
Right.
for dental work. Yeah.
That's a filling, but if you've got knocked in the tooth and you got a fractured tooth and you got an exposed nerve, it's going to hurt. But
Yeah, but putting that in and getting the air off of it
exactly
will help.
Yes, exactly.
There's a book called Where There Is No Doctor.
Yeah.
It's a must-have. It's the standard educational book for teaching the physicians that are going out into third world countries and choose everything up there and what you got with it, which is great.
Here's something to consider. I do courses, so I've done a lot of on my own veterinary work. If you can get penicillin G from your vet store, your pet supplies, it's got a short shelf life, keep it in the refrigerator. Penicillin and any veterinarian supplies will come in handy. We keep sutures on hand. A lot of stuff that we can talk about that more. Vitamins, aspirins, medical supplies. Get that stuff. Get your barter food. One way of retaining water, and this, some of you didn't catch the. I took my old 55-gallon water heater, and you flush those things out. You set up. You can set a bunch of them in your house. If you can go find some cheap ones on Craigslist or something. 55-gallon water heaters are great. You've got a spigot on the bottom. You can rotate your water out. Every once in a while, a couple months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. So those are a really good means of storing water as old water heaters. Again, we talked about ammunition and firearms. The purpose of this is I'm trying to get a core group of folks, and this is the beginning, that you guys are willing to commit to this food storage program, and that we go ahead and the bulk rate, the bulk foods that we're talking about. I've got a price list for Costco back there, and if any of y'all don't have a Costco membership, I can make it work to where we can set up an order. Eventually, like Marty was saying, the LDS Church down in Springs has canners and mylar sealers, and they work with us, so they're good folks. We want to eventually, on down the road, set up a time on a day on a Saturday where you all bring your bulk food. We set that canner up. I was at the about a year ago up in Florissant. They had a food can. That's where they got the canner first. And if we're all working together, we got people, we got tables set up. We can just can food in a really quick way. It's not something that's going to take forever. The Sherwood Forest Homeowners Association has a clubhouse, which is a big house with a kitchen. That's where we'll do it. I don't want to do it here because it gets a little messy when you're throwing flowers in cans and doing all that stuff. So that's what I'd like to do, is get a series of workshops together, get a core group of people. Finances is the biggest issue right now for all of us, I'm sure. So, but we'll start buying our bulk food, and then at a certain point, decision, get the canner and get every cans up in there. But anyway, barter food. Think of that as well, because you're going to have neighbors that are going to be armed, and you might work a deal with those folks. So, yeah.
Just one quick thing, if you're storing food, be sure you have a can opener. I went through a whole bunch of these things, and they had all this can stuff. Well, maybe for you, but little old me, I can't get into a can with just a knife. They never once mentioned a hand can opener.
All right, that's all I have to say. We'll take a break.
Come back.
For somebody who might work there, and I saw it. I first looked to my right, and quite a ways over 100 feet away was obviously, I think it had a blue or green shirt on or something, standing up, looking up at the crowd, and I pretty much assumed he worked there. And he was too far away, so I looked back about 30 feet away, the same thing, a person standing in a colored shirt. And I ran over to him and told him I needed an ambulance. I told him my dad had fallen and broken his leg and we needed an ambulance. But I don't think the show stopped. Because he and I were the only one that knew what was going on. He had no means of stopping the show right away.
And from any of the photographs that you had before you, can you tell me, as best you can recollect, where your dad had was positioned when he had gone down?
Oh, let's see here. Where he ended up, where he was lying on the ground. Is that your question?
Sure. Let's start there, and then let's go back to where he came out to before he was lying down.
Approximately between the tile and the white line.
Okay. Well, for identification purposes, put this as Exhibit 3. Sir, can you tell from Exhibit 3 how far, or not how far up, but what position your father was in prior to winding up between the white line and the tile? If you can tell from that photograph or from any of the other photographs that are before you.
Well, I would say about 3 feet from the end of the concrete barrier. I would say about 3 feet back from there.
Okay, so you're still looking at, for identification purposes, a document marked as 3, photograph marked as 3, and you're pointing to an area that is, if we look at where this young man is in the photograph, on the bottom step would be by the second to the bottom step, but inside the walkway area, the tunnel area?
That's correct.
You said the
I'm
walkway
sorry, about
area
3.
has
The tunnel area.
Oh.
I'm saying about from this point where it goes down, about 3 feet back.
Okay, so 3 feet behind the corner.
Yes.
As we're looking at the photograph by the boy,
Yes.
where his feet are, 3 him, going to
3 feet from the end of where the concrete here.
Yes, sir.
Not the feet.
Just
You're putting them at the
the
same
end
spot.
of concrete. I don't want to confuse with the flooring itself. So from the
The
blue wall.
The blue wall, the vertical
Okay.
end of the concrete on the
Okay.
blue wall.
Going backwards, 3 feet. Okay.
About 3 feet.
We have 1 minute left on this tape.
That's fine. Enough
Do you have another tape?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Right.
Do you have another tape or no?
I have another tape if you would like to further tape, either of you.
I was going to have it taped across, so if you want to stop on direct or you.
That's fine.
All right. See if I can stop it here.
I'm sure that's not for your.
Look around, Dylan. Trying to help him. Right here.
I found blood for you guys. I found blood for you, Dylan.
Here, you want me to help you?
Yeah.
Okay, here.
I found.
Here, I'll hold your basket. You go run and look for him. Here, you want Mama hold your basket? Okay, just trying to help you. Here, guys, look. Here, you guys.
Wow.
Brother, let little brother get some. Dylan! Get one, get it, hurry!
I put another one in there.
Right behind you, Dylan.
I don't want
Dylan, come here. Dylan, come here. Look, come here. Trina, there's still plenty over there for Devin. Dylan, look. Right there. Right there. Look, sugar and the flowers. Go to the tree. Show Auntie Lily.
Find one?
Hey, hurry. Look. Devin, look. Put him in your bed.
I got it.
There's another.
Huh?
Get it.
Did you drop one over here?
Right by the tree, Dylan. Right there. Right there.
I did.
Well, you gotta find them, honey. Come over here.
There's no more over there, Trina. They're all over here. Look.
Dylan keeps backing him.
I got it.
Devin, look. Devin, look at the flowers right there. Let your brother get that one. Let your brother get that one.
Here, Dylan, come over here. Dylan, come over here.
Huh?
Auntie Lily, one sidewalk.
Look.